You're listening to the Peter Ryan Report on CoinSpice.io. You're listening to the Peter Ryan Report on CoinSpice.io.
You're listening to the Peter Ryan Report on CoinSpice.io.
So we are officially back with the Peter Ryan Report on CoinSpice, episode number 4. This time around, we're going to discuss institutional versus commerce, which might be kind of a new idea for people, but I think you'll get it pretty fast here. There is a tension when people tend to look at, especially newer folks, at the Bitcoin ecosystem, in that they're trying to sort of figure out what this thing is. And Peter has a real nice perspective on it. And so, Peter, why don't you kind of outline first the major differences between what would be institutional views of Bitcoin versus, say, the commerce side?
Sure. So if you've been hanging around the crypto industry for a little while now, you probably have heard the catchphrase, institutional is coming. That has really come about post 2017 and signifies that these large capital managers, these tycoons of Wall Street, these large corporations, these types of people, they are the next wave of early adopters into crypto that ultimately will validate the technology, validate the economics behind it, and usher in a wave that says to the general population, you can trust this. It's safe to actually use Bitcoin. It's safe to use cryptocurrency because we are giving it our seal of approval.
This becomes huge because for a lot of people, maybe their first glimpses of Bitcoin or crypto has come through popular media conceptions of, drug dealers and terrorism and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, and so this is where the appeal of this comes in, where, when you think about someone in a suit and tie, someone that is licensed up the wazoo, is getting audited, is following the rules, and is taking care of the pension money that's going to your grandparents, all this type of stuff. When those people get interested, it's sort of it gives you sort of a nice feeling in your stomach. But then again, you can look at it from the point of view that it's not so much a nice feeling, especially if you know some of the things that Austrian economics folks or libertarians in general start to believe, or even leftists that have a healthy view of how the economy works, is that a lot of these people are the prime beneficiaries of a crony capitalist system where central banks inflate money and they are the first to get those bags, which then misallocated out into the economy to siphon off value from everyone else, which thus encourages inflation. And then they are, again, the prime recipient of those effects. Plus, while getting into bed with politicians to suit regulations in their favor and crowd out competing players. So when you think of it from that perspective, why is it that these are the people that are the quote unquote saviors of Bitcoin, when Bitcoin is almost built antithetical to them? And not almost, but it exactly
is. It's a reaction to it. Exactly. It is interesting that now, at least since I've been involved in crypto, the institutional fever, it's sort of a fever dream, I guess, in that we're waiting for the backs of the world. We're waiting for these huge companies to come in, these finance arms, and sort of level everything out and make it legit. And you had a really nice point when we did some of the pre-show stuff here. You were talking about, sort of easier to get a big whale versus a bunch of little fishes, and also our relative size as a community. Like we are, we feel like, we're pretty big, but in the scheme of things, we're actually, fairly small.
Yeah, so there's estimates of how big the cryptocurrency population actually is. Some say there's about 20 million people that actually own cryptocurrency. Some say it's as high as 40 million. But when you compare that to a global population of about 7 to 8 billion, we're still very meager size here. And even just looking at the dollar value, a market cap hovering around 250 billion currently isn't really saying a lot. So when you go from the perspective of we're still super small, and how are we going to convince millions to billions of people to adopt this? There is another quantitative appeal to actually going to small fish that can just have this outsized influence in terms of the dollar value that they can allocate to Bitcoin, opposed to a bunch of other little fishes that don't really have those dollars behind them. So if you can get one of these big asset managers to allocate 5% of their portfolio, you might 2x, 10x Bitcoin overnight. And so that's very attractive from a marketing ROI perspective of how do we get this thing going with legs. And while that can be attractive, again, we get back to this whole idea that Bitcoin is built antithetical to that. And historically, there never really was such opposition to the idea of using this in commerce and using this for everyday people and using this for even the quintessential poor person in a developing country that is living on less than $2 a day. That Bitcoin is supposed to be P2P cash, that is instant, that is global, and that is super cheap, so that whether you are this rich tycoon on Wall Street, or you're this average Joe living in the suburbs, or you're someone in a developing country, there was this value that everyone could use it together to transact and increase the global economic pie through this mechanism.
And it's speaking of pies, by the way, but also, we're 10 years into this, and so now that the institutions are taking notice, and there's even more talk than I've ever heard before about institutional money coming in. There's a lot of work that's been done to get here. So in other words, I think what the tension is between institutional and commerce in terms of these two camps, the real one that you pointed out to me is the fact that really before institutions will even take notice, it has to be the Bitcoin has to be demonstrated. People have to sort of take wind and give it this sort of network effect value. And I believe later this month, I want to say the 29th of May, we celebrate every year Bitcoin Pizza Day. And what does buying pizza have to do with these giant institutions maybe becoming interested in crypto and Bitcoin?
Exactly. So Bitcoin Pizza Day, years back when this stuff was even more unknown than it is currently, a guy went out and he decided to use his Bitcoin to buy some pizza. And lo and behold, there was someone on the other side of that trade that said, yeah, I'm going to take that Bitcoin. I'm going to say this pizza that I made is equivalent to the value that I'm placing on that Bitcoin you want to give me. And suddenly that was a magic moment. That was a moment in which we were validating the technology, the utility, all of the intangible qualities that go into this all at once, because we were increasing the network effect in terms of you had one guy holding Bitcoin and then suddenly there was a guy that traded him pizza for it. And now we just grew branches out. And now value is not just getting added, but it's multiplying. And so that is just a example we can highlight, we can magnify that represents a totality of other efforts that were going on in the early days of people using this in commerce, of people getting others interested and performing those economic calculations in their heads to say that this is actually valuable. And without that going on, without people spending, you would actually not have seen the price appreciation. And we can talk about how, you know, we have to hodl. And, you know, that term has been misconstrued in terms of the exact event that it was being used when it was first invented. But, you know, we have to hold, you know, all our Bitcoin. We can never spend it. We just got to wait until it pumps and it goes to the moon. And, you know, that is not the secret sauce to getting this up, because that's not what people did in the early days.
Right. But then what they're going to do is come right back at you and say, well, as you know, Anderson Cooper just did a little blip on 60 Minutes with regard to the Bitcoin pizza dude, and interviewed him. And Cooper, like, he does the math. The Bitcoin was a few cents at the time, and the guy sent over how many Bitcoins, you know, that was to the pizza parlor proprietor. And, you know, Cooper looks up and does the math kind of quickly and goes, so let me get this straight. You spent $800 million on a pizza. That's kind of sexy. I mean, it's very difficult to overcome that, because all the hodl people will be like, you know, see, you should have never spent it. But they're missing a huge part of that story. Exactly.
And it's like, wow, if only I kept that Bitcoin and I'd be an 800 millionaire by now. And while that is definitely eye-catching and really rubs you the wrong way, what we have to acknowledge again is that without that guy spending the money back then and increasing the network effect of proving the utility of the currency part of cryptocurrency,
massive publicity,
that price would not have appreciated, even from, you know, the word of mouth, the marketing that it all generated, and just that individual moment that we talked about of the buyer and seller coming together. You know, these are those quintessential and magic moments that I spoke of, that made Bitcoin validated, that pushed the price up, and that, you know, really showed that this can be used in commerce. This isn't just some speculative asset that, you know, we invest in to hedge traditional markets, even though it can be used as that. And that's not to say that we shouldn't be saving some amount of Bitcoin. And again, let's put things in a wider picture, because people on the Austrian economics side of the equation might start to say, well, you know, we need saving, and that's the foundation of the economy, and that produces capital, and, you know, saving is good, and that is a use case in of itself. And no one's saying that it's not good. It's just to say there's a healthy balance here. And, you know, perhaps even the staunchest Austrian economists would say that, you know, you shouldn't save 100% of your money. And when we look at some data, and let's just take the US historical, you know, the past half century, you know, we saw anywhere from a high of a personal savings rate of about 20% of people's income to a low of about, you know, 5%. And really the average, you could say, is about 10. And recently we're looking at about 6%. And so let's just use that average of about 10%, let's say, and apply that to Bitcoin. If just people are normally having a savings rate of 10%, you know, that means 90% is being used in commerce. And okay, Bitcoin's pretty early, it's pretty speculative, and there's definitely investment gains to be made here. But does that mean, you know, the savings rate is 20%, 30%, 40%? It certainly is debatable that it is higher than, you know, the US dollar savings rate for people. That's certainly, you know, a defensible position. But to say that it's 100%, to say that it should not even be used half of the Bitcoin in commerce that you engage in, I think that is really a stretch. And that, again, is cutting at the core value propositions that are balanced out here of that store of value and that medium of exchange, where you can't actually have the store of value and the and people coming on board to appreciate this without people actually seeing it as a form of money that's actually useful in their day-to-day lives.
I think the watch phrase here that we use on the commerce side of things, on the currency side of cryptocurrency, is spend and replace. No one on our side doesn't believe in savings and holding and investing. It's more about the value of that investment, reaching exponential heights because more people are using it and involved with it. All right, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on and another great Peter Ryan report. Where can people find your work?
Yeah, people can follow me at Twitter @_Peter Ryan. That's where you can find some great stuff. I tweet quite a bit, charts, data, reporting of the industry, some really cool memes, stuff like that. Also, recently launched, you can follow me at ryanresearch.co. It's my new research firm, and we'll be reporting on mainly cryptocurrency as well as other cutting edge technologies. You can find articles, videos, podcasts that I've been on, and you can soon find in-depth and data-driven reports on there that cover the gamut when it comes to what's going on in this industry. And always, please subscribe to my newsletter.
You're listening to the Peter Ryan Report on CoinSpice.io. You're listening to the Peter Ryan Report on CoinSpice.io.
You're listening to the Peter Ryan Report on CoinSpice.io.